the idea that I circulated at the beginning of the day, which is, personal interest of mine and one that I think has value to circular economies, of trying to connect circular economies on the ground in a host country, El Salvador, for instance, to the diaspora community living abroad. So how do we connect Salvadorans at Berlin, Bitcoin Beach, in El Sonte, La Piraya, etc., to Salvadorans living abroad in Los Angeles, Toronto, and elsewhere, the Haitian community in Montreal, Miami, New York, to the circular economy that's being built in Haiti, etc. Because the idea is you want to connect that flow of sats to and from through remittances, etc. So if anyone has ideas related to that, if anyone would like to pursue that idea a little bit further, that's something I'm really interested in pursuing. But with that, I'll throw it over to Herman, Adam, and Pierre to talk about the circular economies that they lead and work with, and then maybe we'll take some questions and just jump back and forth between you guys.
Sounds good. Who's going to go first?
You're furthest away.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we're a stone's throw away from the OG circular economy, which is Bitcoin Beach, that kind of inspired this whole movement. There was an earlier attempt in the Netherlands. So when we talk about circular economies, as much as Bitcoin Beach inspired all of us, I think it's worth mentioning that there's a project in Arnhem in the Netherlands where they've experimented with the idea of a circular economy since 2014. So they started with the on-chain version of what we today do on Lightning, and that kind of effort, they ran into some trouble in 2017 when on-chain fees spiked, and kind of stopped the effort, and then started off again when Lightning became widely implemented. But Bitcoin Beach was what really sort of supercharged the circular economy idea. That's what inspired us. I looked at Bitcoin Beach in 2019 for the first time. I heard an interview with Mike Peterson, and light bulbs just started going off. We had an existing community-based project at that time that I'd been managing for a long time, and I listened to what they were doing here in El Sonte, and it just kind of hit me that this is kind of the natural evolution of a community-based project. Whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's education, soup kitchen, whatever the case may be, it just makes sense to integrate Bitcoin into what you're doing. In our case, the way we did that was we started off slowly but surely transitioning the salaries of the staff that work for our organization from fiat over to Bitcoin. And we slowly but surely started accepting donations in Bitcoin rather than fiat. And today, 3 years later, we're pretty much 99% of the way there. So we do hardly anything in fiat anymore. We don't pay any salaries in fiat, and we do hardly any fundraising in fiat. It's all Bitcoin based. So we have a staff of 16 people that works for us. We've got a daily attendance of about 60 kids. The project runs 5 days a week. We teach the kids surfing. We teach them about Bitcoin. We feed them, and it's actually quite simple, really. We don't have a huge amount of businesses on board accepting Bitcoin. We tend to onboard businesses as we employ more staff. We operate in a very, very poor neighborhood. It's a slum in South Africa. We call these townships. So the only way to get Bitcoin into the community is through the salaries that we pay. It's not the kind of place where tourists would go into. Generally speaking, tourists are advised not to go to these places. If you see a white person in one of these places, they're probably lost. So it's one of those types of neighborhoods. And so there's little point in us onboarding 30 shops if we only have 10 people working for us. So we've kind of onboarded merchants as we've expanded our operations and employed more staff and paid more Bitcoin salaries. So there's about 25 businesses in the community that accept Bitcoin as payment. Most of them are small grocery stores where you could buy all the daily necessities. There's a pharmacy. There's a couple of hairdressers. It's very, very simple, really. Yeah.
How's it going? I think we're on. Testing. Good. Yeah, I think that's been very interested in following the Bitcoin Ekasi project because it's very proximal to our location in Zambia, and it was started in a similar fashion, although the pathways ended up being a little bit different for us. Again, my name's Adam. I'm with Bitcoin Victoria Falls, and there's a second project that I'm working on called Bitcoin Montserrat, but I'll really stay focused on the one that's launched at this point, and where our successes have been with Bitcoin Victoria Falls, and kind of parlay a little bit off of what Herman said. I had the idea when visiting Bitcoin Beach as well in 2022. I met with Chimbera, had lunch with him. We were down, my wife and I and our dog were just down and palling around and observing everything going on here after the legal tender law was passed. And I'm somebody who likes to get into places and observe and see the proof of work and just integrate with the culture and do as much as I can to just enjoy it and be local. And in kind of observing what was happening at Bitcoin Beach and experiencing it myself, I started to think about how I could take that approach on a global, somewhere globally. I'm somebody who loves to travel and have a lot of connections overseas internationally, and so my mind immediately went to an NGO that I had been donating to since 2016 called the Free Haven Community Initiative in Livingston, Zambia. And I believed a lot in their mission. You know, they were working with K through 12 children who are on the lower end of the poverty line in Zambia, making sure that they were both supported in their educational efforts, had nutrition, and had tutor support and all of those things. So similar in Herman, in kind of the nonprofit kind of wing of things, a little bit different in kind of how things proliferated after that. We ended up creating Bitcoin Victoria Falls as kind of a parallel to Free Haven. They weren't necessarily all in on Bitcoin or all in on going forward with it. And instead of trying to convince their board and convince their executive director, I just decided to move forward with the project in the local area myself and build the proof of work. And then down the line, we would work towards integrating some of the things that the nonprofit does and what we were doing with the Bitcoin Victoria Falls project. And I'm happy to say that I did just join the board for Free Haven and also am their treasurer now. So we'll see where that goes. But that just happened a couple weeks ago. So still early days there from the Bitcoin lens. But anyway, we launched Bitcoin Victoria Falls in April after I was able to identify a Zambian to be my teacher. And to be my boots on the ground and my co-founder. He's turned into my co-founder and just been absolutely amazing. So I've heard several times so far on this trip that the people are important to the projects, and that couldn't be more true about Humphrey, who is the lead and the teacher and the co-founder for Bitcoin Victoria Falls, Zambia. I would say that we have approached this project in kind of 3 different stages, and the first stage being, I would say the most important, is education. We have deployed the Me Premier Bitcoin curriculum and really focused on educating the people who wanted to come and learn. Our classroom can fit about 20 people. And because Humphrey was located in Lusaka, which was about 8 hours from Livingston, he originally took on the project as a part-time opportunity and would travel for 5 weeks at a time to teach the course. We consolidated the 10-week course into 5 weeks, doing 2 lessons per week. And then we would also host a meetup while he was in the area. So our goals were monthly meetups, and a 5-week course, and we were able to do 3 courses this year and graduate approximately 20 students each time. Our meetups have been extremely well attended. There was the benefit of having a hostel in the area that was owned by a Canadian who was interested and had already was a Bitcoiner himself, and so we were able to use that location for our meetups and pay him in Bitcoin for the food and beverage. And Humphrey also stayed at that hostel when he was in the area, so it was nice to have that additional person in the area who understood the Bitcoin lens and angle of things. He wasn't necessarily somebody that was jumping 2 feet into my version of the project, but he was somebody there that was supportive and able to host the meetups for us and able to have a great location for that. So that's kind of where we're at. We're really excited about 2025 because Humphrey's officially relocated to Livingston and is there full time now. So we're pushing forward with 6 to 8 courses of the Meet Premier Bitcoin next year and 12 meetups month over month. And we're just going to continue to see where this project goes and continue to stay lean, as Herman has advised and been very supportive of us as well, and continue to work towards Bitcoin adoption in the local area and Bitcoin education. So, yeah.
Hello, my name is Pierre. I landed in El Salvador March 1st of this year, and I'd been following the activities in Berlin for a while before that, and I said, I just want to go check that out. So I come as an observer, not as an expert as a Bitcoiner, but really just an observer. So when I got there, I met up with the team, and I just fell in love with the place and the community. So I decided to stay. So my observations, it's been, 8 months now. I believe we're at about 140 merchants now out of 600. So that's basically 1/6 of the businesses. And the interesting thing about that is it's just kind of normal now. It's not this special thing. Some people don't use it, but we all sort of know each other now. And they recognize me when I'm walking down the street. They say hello, So it's just normalized. That's how I would describe it. It has a long way to go, of course. We want it to grow. We want people to spend more and so on. I live pretty much on the Bitcoin standard. I'm going to say 90% of my spending, and I think that's pretty typical with our group. Our Bitcoin Center, which is sort of the hub, the locus of all of this work and this energy, was founded a year before I got there. So the momentum was already there, and I just said I want to be part of that. So the cool thing there, it was founded by Gerardo and Evelyn, and then Nikki and James are very important as well online, and Charlie. So all those people, they were sort of celebrities in my eyes before I got here. And then when I got here, it was like instant community, which was amazing. So Bitcoin is almost, it's very important. We talk about it all the time, but it's sort of this under layer of the culture, which I think is the way it should go. It shouldn't be this special, separate thing. I think I've used a bank machine, an ATM, I believe 4 times since March, since I've been here, which is really cool. So I think for me, it's a cultural shift, and it just changes a lot of things. As you guys all know, I don't have to even explain the changes that happen when you understand it. But when you're living in it, as opposed to just being a hodler going as a tourist, it's a very different experience. All of your decisions change. You question, the price of things in a different way. Do I really need that extra bedspread? So you become a little bit frugal, but you also become a little more sort of experiential in terms of how your life is. And so for me, Berlin is a cultural movement more than anything else. And I think that's a model that, and it's very loose. It's so decentralized. Like our Bitcoin Center is really cool because we have meetups every Monday, and sometimes there's a lot of people, sometimes they're small, but it's definitely a mix of locals and expats. It's about 75% in Spanish. We're learning, we're trying. Next year when you hear me, I'll be speaking Spanish here, I promise. Put that on record. So the cool thing is when you have an idea for something or a project, it's pretty much, you can just, people will provide resources or advice or help, and it's okay, run with it, it's yours. So that's great in a way, but it's also a little bit overwhelming sometimes because everybody has 3 or 4 ideas and projects going on. But the good thing is there's a built-in community and sort of this loose infrastructure of brain power and kind of faith, I would say, in it, and that we just don't question it. It just works. We're normalizing it, and the moment you can just sort of feel the momentum. It's not like this surge. Some people show up and they're expecting to see Bitcoiners running around everywhere, but it's more subtle than that, right? They'll go and buy a smoothie from a 68-year-old lady, and they go to pay cash, and she goes, Bitcoin. So those kind of little moments are really nice. And then also in terms of paying your rent, having your water delivered, things like that, where it's just normal. So for me, what I'm really interested in now is how do we sort of systematize that or without ruining it, finding a way to sort of prototype that and then take what we're doing with Premier Bitcoin and maybe building on the graduates taking them to the next level, so that how can they now go out as street teams in some way and replicate what we did in Berlin and then build on it and make it a little more structured so that it can spread a little more widely and a little quicker, because I feel that it's taking a long time in the country. When, you know, Bukele launched a coffee brand in 1 month and everybody knows about it. So I think with that PR expertise and those resources, I think they could do the same with Bitcoin, and I think we could be a model for that. And then just having all the people here, like the brain power on this property is a little amazing, a little overwhelming. So I think by putting together sort of the expertise that we have, and then just the daily moments of life, and how do we push that forward and to replicate it, I think that's a way to move forward with this project.
Awesome. Let's sort out to you. Do you have any particular questions or anything you want to add about circular economies? Like, what do you want to get out of this?
How do you solve the, I guess for lack of a better term, the chicken and the egg problem with circular economies? You know, telling a merchant to start accepting Bitcoin when they're not getting any customers that will pay in Bitcoin, or getting potential customers to pay in Bitcoin when there aren't any merchants that will accept Bitcoin. And so this kind of chicken and egg problem. What steps have you taken to get past that?
Yeah, that's probably the most important question you could ask when it comes to circular economies. I've come to understand that onboarding merchants is not the most important thing to do. Solving the spending side is more important. You got to figure that out. You got to first, before you worry about onboarding merchants, you got to figure out who's going to be the one spending the sats, because that's actually quite difficult. In our case, what we did was we used an existing organization. As I briefly touched on, we had a non-profit that had been operating in that particular community for over a decade. And so we had an existing fundraising mechanisms. It's a donation-based non-profit, so we've been doing fundraising for a while. And so we basically just flipped that over from fiat to Bitcoin. So we started fundraising in Bitcoin, we started paying salaries in Bitcoin, and that's how we started getting sats into the community. And then the coaches who were getting their salaries in Bitcoin, they were the ones who were onboarding the shops. Obviously, that's one way of doing it, but it's not always going to work in that way. And I guess in other circumstances, you've got to look for other ways. But that's the more important part to figure out, is the spending side. As awesome as BTC Map is, I use it all the time. I think it's fantastic, but I don't think one should pay too much attention to how many merchants are on board in a particular area, because I think it doesn't give you an accurate sense of how many sats are actually being spent there. And what you really want is you want every single merchant that is onboarded to have at least one Bitcoin transaction per day. Otherwise, what's the point? If they're only accepting Bitcoin once a month, I don't really see the point in onboarding that merchant. But it's a tricky one to solve, and I guess the most generic answer to that is to start with what you have. So if you have an existing business, then maybe see if you can start paying your employee bonuses in Bitcoin, and then encourage them to onboard the merchants where they go and spend their sats or something like that.
I was going to say one of the things in Berlin is the fact that it's very much about not over-promising and under-delivering. Okay, so it's really important that that's the case, because what ends up happening is if you sort of say, if you start accepting Bitcoin, you're going to get all these people turn up, and that's not true if you're a shoe shop, because people only want to buy shoes once every 6 months or what have you. So it's really important that you go, this is just another form of earning an income. It's just another, rather than, you've got your cash, you've got your credit cards. This is just another way to receive a payment. And from that, it's just, slowly, more people will turn up and create.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar to that, because I'm in sales for my full-time job, and the most important part of sales is honesty. and full transparency, and not over-promising and under-delivering, right? You need to really be straightforward with them. So I think if you can go to them and say, especially early on, the amount of transactions that you'll take in Bitcoin is probably around 0 to 5% of all of your transactions. If you're very transparent about that, and then also helping them, I think what's going to help us over the long term is getting them to the right POS software wallet that's going to be best for their operations, and that comes with discovery, asking a lot of questions, staying alongside them. Another thing that I heard worked really well from a merchant perspective out of British Columbia and the Vancouver area is high attention to customer service and detail, and making sure that if they have a challenge or if they're running into something technologically, that you have somebody that can be there on call almost to go and troubleshoot with them and support that. We're still very early in merchant adoption. The other thing I would say along those lines is that a lot of the merchants that have started accepting Bitcoin in Livingston right now are people that have taken our course. And so they know the value, and they're open to kind of seeing where it goes from there, right? And that we're not going and just targeting random merchants, right? So I think it kind of, in that sense, it's growing organically from the people who are coming to learn, and then there you have a business themselves that they want to take. So we're in a very touristy area for Victoria Falls. It's multiple safari options nearby, multiple national parks, Victoria Falls itself, zip lines, whitewater rafting, all that stuff. But like Herman has advised me, you can't just be reliant on Bitcoin tourists either. You need to build that local circular economy from the people that live there themselves to sustain that. And then I think what we're hoping to do over the long term is that, yes, we're going to build that locally, and then when those tourists come in that are Bitcoiners, we've got a great place for them to send sats as well. But we're still working on that.
Hey,
I was going to just add, if I could, really quick, something to that just might from the context of Vancouver being there, because I'm from Toronto and we don't have a circular economy going. Very few places accept Bitcoin. We have a group of co-conspirators in Toronto that are like threatening to establish a local circular economy, but it's like, where do we start? And like that supply-demand issue has reared its head, and we're like, okay, we've got to bolster educational efforts to create that demand for services. But what we've learned from Vancouver, which has a pretty high penetration rate in terms of merchant adoption, spending, etc., talking to them, it's been really, again, being honest and authentic with them, saying like, look, this is not going to solve your business shortfall overnight. This is going to be a marginal new consumer market for you to take advantage of. But what you're going to find is that these few people that will shop at your location are passionate about it. They will promote your business, and they will tell people about your business. That translates into free marketing, and that will go far and wide, not just in Vancouver, but other places. So you will have Bitcoiners from around the world potentially. I mean, not in all circumstances, but somewhere like Vancouver, a big, magnet city in some cases, coming to visit. They'll know about your shop and they'll come spend their sats. In addition, this is a global money. So, by word of mouth and connections, we're connected all over the place. People will inevitably, come to learn about your business, possibly even just send you sats because, you're a business that's accept. So don't underestimate the value of all of that. And then again, the takeaway around what to do then with this, these sats that you collect. The recommendation that seems from their experience to work with people is just hold it. Just hold it. Let that be your savings. At some point in the future, there might be more adoption, more people coming to spend, but for now, just put it aside and hold it. Consider that like an investment. Hopefully at some point then that'll translate into recycling locally into an economy, but at least it gives them a sense of like, what am I going to do with this? Consider it savings. And that seems to have had, remarkable success in Vancouver, where there's something like 100 vendors in a city like that are now accepting Bitcoin, and it seems to be catching steam. So that's probably, especially relevant to a context like Canada, United States, European countries, etc. But I just wanted to add that in. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I have two questions. of the day, the merchant has to buy things, you know, I don't know, whatever they are selling, and they are not selling that in Bitcoin. No? And the second is a little bit of what you were referring. And it's a question: do we really need circular economies, or what we want is merchants that accept Bitcoin?
Sorry, can you rephrase that? You said, do we really need
circular economies rather than, you know, just promote the adoption of Bitcoin, which I think is different, no? Because I think on your point, at the end of the day, I want more Bitcoin.
Right. I don't know. That's a tough one, because to have, I mean, a circular economy doesn't have to be closed. It's just an infrastructure that supports itself, supports each other, because we still have to live in the fiat world. So I think it's a both-end situation, honestly. But the volatility, honestly, I can't comment on that. For me, when I see people in our town and they will get paid in Bitcoin and then they ask how to sell it. I mean, when it's high, for example, right? That's a bit of a problem. So I think that's an education piece that needs to be sort of promoted more. A little bit of sort of the daily transactions part of your life, and then the savings part that maybe we need to promote a little bit more. With the Blink wallet, for example, we can lock into the US dollar and so on. But yeah, that's a tricky one. And I don't think there's one Bitcoiner here who can rationalize volatility. It's just, for me, I don't care. I'm just, one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin. I don't care. Honestly, I don't get panicky. I get phone calls the last few days because it's so high from friends. How do I buy Bitcoin? And I'm like, you know. So I don't know. I have no comment on volatility. it's just part of life.
From the merchant side, you have to understand their operating costs are not going to be 100% of their revenue. At least you would hope not. And so from the statistics, if you look at how many transactions are being done in Bitcoin from the merchants themselves, again, most of those are in the 0 to 5% range. And so ultimately, if their operating costs are less than 95% of the revenue, then the math works out that they shouldn't need that the volatility shouldn't be as big of an impact for them, because they are holding a small portion of their total revenue in that. And again, I think that ultimately also boils down to education of the merchant itself and whether they've, you know, gone through the learning process as well. But I think that's where I recently made a business card that I can hand out in my local community in Delaware, and it says, you know, merchant accepting Bitcoin, 0 to 3% of your transactions, hold as a treasury, and reach out if you're interested. And so I think it's that message that it is going to be a small percentage of your transactions at this point, and that shouldn't, if the business is run well, that shouldn't necessarily impact their operating costs significantly.
Yeah, so I think I think the most interesting question there is, do we really need circular economies? And I think my way of answering that would be to say, I mean, look, the term circular economy does not mean that everybody is only spending their Bitcoin in that particular community where it flows in a perfect circle. I think the term circular economy more refers to the fact that you're trying to encourage people to, as far as possible, avoid exchanging the Bitcoin to fiat and to keep it in Bitcoin. Whether they're spending it in that particular community and it all forms a nice perfect circle, or whether or not they're taking the Bitcoin outside and spending it somewhere else, as long as they're not converting it to fiat, to me that forms part of the global circular economy, because that's ultimately what we want. We want a global circular economy. And for me personally, the reason I want that is freedom and privacy. Bitcoin has some very specific trade-offs that it makes in terms of privacy. You cannot have perfect privacy in Bitcoin for various technical reasons. Lightning does improve that to some extent, but it's also not a perfect solution. For me, the way you solve the privacy issue is if no one uses fiat. if there are no on-ramps and off-ramps and we're all just using Bitcoin, then we don't really have to worry about on-chain privacy because we're all just a random number. So yes, we absolutely need circular economies, but not in the way that most people think. You got to keep it in that community, and the sats must only flow in that community so that you make a little perfect circle in that community. So that's the one thing. The volatility question, I think the merchants have been quite happy about the volatility the past 2 weeks. So, we have, there are things that you can use that take the volatility away. Blink has its stable sats, there's stable coins. But, funny enough, in our case, we've educated people on that. We've showed them how to use stable sats and stable coins, and we've not really had a very high adoption of that. And I think at the end of the day, when everything is in Bitcoin, it just tends to even out over time. This week you might earn your salary and the price goes down 5%. Next week you earn your salary, the price goes up 5%. So over the long run, and this is not my intuitive opinion, I would have thought that the people whose salaries, because look, we don't pay massive salaries. It's a non-profit, and the people live in a pretty poor community. So I would have thought that stable coins and stable sats would be very high adoption, but we haven't seen such a high adoption of that. And I think they've realized that over the long run, eventually just trust Bitcoin to do what it does if you stay in it long enough.
Thank you.
Of mission, right? And we live and spend and earn locally, and I think giving people a sense of that within that locale, wherever that is, that there is that vision of of moving towards a Bitcoin standard is really the social construct that people need to, like I used to say in my old work when I used to talk about a community health center. People were like, do we really need to name it or whatnot? I was like, yeah, I need a noun in my sentence. Like I need something to fix my mind to and kind of attach to, and it doesn't mean that it's permanent. It's just something that kind of gives us that sense of attachment, belonging, meaning, so that we can go forward at the mission at a local level. So I would imagine, maybe, who knows, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, we hopefully won't be talking about Bitcoin circular economies, but we'll be talking about the global Bitcoin circular economies, and these things will all just flow into each other, and it'll just be, people spend and earn in Bitcoin or whatnot. For the time being, I think it serves an important purpose, at our state of adoption. That's my sense.
Can I add something to that? I think the term circular economy is kind of like a code word for, first of all, do not convert to fiat at all costs, number one. And number two, it's about grassroots support and kind of this idea that you're focused on a small geographic location and trying to support the people who are adopting Bitcoin, whether it's people earning and spending or whether it's merchants accepting. You're focused on a small geographic location so that you can provide direct, in-person, in real-life support to the people who are going through this process of accepting Bitcoin. And I think that's really important because, the experience of paying in Bitcoin in El Zonte is pretty smooth. I can walk into a little shop that is, this tiny little thing built in a dingy shack, and the process of paying in Bitcoin is super smooth. Whereas, yesterday I was at Pizza Hut, and as soon as they opened Chivo Wallet, I was like, oh shit, because it's just a nightmare. And if you want proof positive that top down doesn't work, then look at Chivo Wallet. It's been 2 years. I was here 2 years ago. I'm here 2 years later. Same problems. Nothing has been solved. I still can't pay in Bitcoin when I walk into a shop because the people behind the counter don't understand what they're doing when they open Chivo Wallet. And the reason they don't understand is because that in-person support is not there. There's nobody who's a community leader walking into Pizza Hut once every other day explaining to them, hey, this is how you do it. No, don't worry about that. You don't have. That's not happening. So circular economy, it's not actually about the circular. The word circular is actually a bit of a misnomer. It's more about don't convert to fiat as far as possible, number one, and number two, provide in-person, on-the-ground support for the people who are trying to do this, so that you don't end up with a Chivo-like situation where people are ready to accept Bitcoin as payment, but they just can't.
we talk a little bit about the merchants and like the tools that you're using for the merchants, like what wallets and how do you like what? I know there's specific things for specific places, but for merchants, as you're going to a coffee shop in Colorado and saying, hey, yes, you want to accept Bitcoin, here's the wallet you should use, here's how we do this, and also specifically for US, if anyone has any insight on that.
I think this is where that customer service and sales assessment really comes into play, and it goes back to their knowledge and interest in the trade-offs perspective. I think it's actually an area in Bitcoin that we have a lot of work to do, because there is obviously a significant value in having them on something like a BTC Pay server that's non-custodial, and versus a custodial app. And there's a couple of back-end solutions for accounting and stuff along those lines. But I think it is interesting, kind of based on it. To me, it kind of goes back to some of the regulatory concerns in the location that each individual person or merchant would be located in addition to what's best from them from an operational perspective, and then in addition to what are their moral desires and underlying perspective around custodial versus non-custodial and that. So I think that's where it's kind of there's a multi-pronged approach to kind of assessing what their situation is, and then offering the best solution, and that ultimately comes down to building that out. And I think there is a lot of work to do in that sense. So I don't know that there's a perfect answer to that, but I that's where I think it really comes down to an individual and individual assessment of the situation, and then making the best recommendation possible.
I mean, our standard go-to option is Blink. I think it's an awesome tool. But other than that, there's so much happening and there's so much being developed. But there's a lot of work that remains to be done there. It has to become a lot easier. It has become a lot easier compared to what it was, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago. It's become way, way easier. But again, the sort of the Chivo experience shows me that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. It needs to be as easy as using WhatsApp, and it's not at that level yet. But yeah, Blink Wallet is great. BTC Pay server is pretty good. That's also not super user friendly just yet. What else? Aqua Wallet has done a lot of good work. I think it's a good compromise between self-custody and ease of use. Yeah, I don't know what else. Aqua Wallet.
Zaprite. I've heard good things about Zaprite for businesses. And then Wallet of Satoshi actually led the survey on its use. Bitcoinize, and then CoinOS I have heard good things about, again, in that Vancouver area. So again, that's where it's really hard. I think, to me, somebody that's in sales, I would see that we really need to figure out what are our discovery questions, and then what are our 5 to 10 pathways that we would offer based on their answers to those discovery questions. And that's kind of how I would see the assessment of, how built out is their business? Do they need the back end stuff as well? Are they really just looking for a front end wallet that that they can? But Blink, again, I think Blink has really crushed it in that sense. The challenge that I have is that Blink is not available in the U.S. So again, it goes to this jurisdictional problem. It goes back to ultimately the problem of fiat and KYC, AML, and all of that stuff that ultimately creates some barriers to us. Just making this extremely easy for everybody.
In Berlin, pretty much everybody uses Blink. It's really easy. It's simple. The stores use Tianki POS, and our team pretty good. If a store has a problem, they call the Bitcoin Center, and somebody runs over and gives them a hand. I've seen that a few times. It's pretty cool. But yeah, that's what we use. It's really smooth. Just
a big shout out to anybody who does develop these apps, because it's It's not easy to do, first of all, and second of all, it's not clear that there's a obvious business behind it. I think a lot of these wallets are struggling to make money. I don't think they are $1 million businesses. I know of a few instances where they have had to resort to, working for free to make things happen. So yeah, just a shout out, because without that, it wouldn't be possible. So let's hope they keep doing what they're doing.
I like to point out another couple of tools that you can use. Okay, so absolutely, it really depends on the business. If you're looking in Latin America, of course, you've got businesses who are pupusas. You're not going to be able to put BTC Pay server on a pupuseria when a Blink wallet is going to be easy. But the other thing is, and I really noticed it in Suriname, was the fact that they get them on the wallets, but then that's only one person. That person isn't in the store, and so when you go into the store to pay with Bitcoin, the wallet's not there. So what we do in Berlin is we actually create a QR code from the Blink wallet, and we have that up on there. And so what people can do is they can then pay the QR code, and then the problem with that is they have to be reliant on the person in putting the dollar amount in. So you've got to make sure that they see the correct dollar amount, and then pay that way. But it goes directly to the owner's wallet. But it is a really good tool to have, and it's something that has been amazing with the Berlin team. Every business